Hello and welcome to Epochs. This is a very special episode, an entirely different thing actually. This is the 250th episode. So I thought we would mark it with something a little bit different, a retrospective basically. If you've tuned in this week, like a good fan of Epochs, expecting a story all about history, you're not going to get it. What I'm going to do this time, just a one-off. I might do it again for like the 500th episode, if I ever get to 500 episodes. I might do something similar at that point. So it really is a one-off. And I'm just going to talk about epochs. Do a history of epochs, just to mark the 250th episode of it. So there you go. I'm in the first studio with the special bespoke Epochs video wall. And hopefully this is for fans of Epochs, like the people that really do watch it, every single one. This is for you guys. If you want to know a little bit about behind the scenes and a little bit of the history, my thoughts and feelings about it, and any little tidbits, the story of Epochs, if you like. So it's very different to any other episode I've ever done, and it really is a one-off. So I hope you like it. I hope it goes down well. But after this week, I'll be going back to talking about history again. So, okay, the 250th episode. Okay, enjoy. All right, so it started very nearly 5 years ago now. So episode 256 will be the 5-year anniversary of it. I haven't missed a week. I haven't missed a single week in 5 years. I'm quite proud of that record. My attendance record, effectively. There was 1 week in 5 years where the Epochs didn't go out until the Monday. But that wasn't my fault. It really wasn't. It was all recorded and all edited and everything was fine, and then there was some technical hitch on the Sunday. Some computers fell over, or I don't even know. I don't really deal with that side of things, of posting it on YouTube and posting it on the website. Something happened on the Sunday and it didn't go out on the Sunday. But I'd done my job, everything was fine, and it went out on the Monday. Other than that 1 week, I think that's the only time. Other than that 1 week, it's always gone out on a Sunday for 5 years straight. Despite illness, despite COVID, despite anything and everything. Sunday, you get an Epoch. You get a long form bit of history from your history bro, Bo Dade. And long may it last. I enjoy it. I'm sort of proud of the oeuvre. I'm proud of the body of work. It will live longer. It will live longer than me. Right? It's digital. It's there forever. It'll be archived somewhere or other for a long, long time, long after I'm gone, I would have thought. So I'm proud of it, and I'm grateful to you guys. So let's talk about, so episode 1, very, very nearly 5 years ago, Mr. Cole Benjamin, that Sargon of Akkad fella, he employs me to be sort of a presenter and a writer. Used to do a lot more writing of articles on the website, but mainly to be the history person, to make quality. The idea is to be quality behind the paywall content, and I'd be the history themed person that does that. And so when I first turned up, week 1, this is what Carl always does with new employees, is a little bit drops you in the deep end on, like, in your first week. A little bit, usually, not always, but it's like, make a bit of content now, go, just to see how you sort of deal with it a bit. But I was fine, because just talking about history in a long-form content was already my bread and butter. I already had my channel, History Bro, and just love history, always have. So the idea of just being asked to just sit down and do an hour or more of talking about history was not a problem, right? It's really not a problem for me. I could just hit the ground running. All right. Now, I thought, where me and Carl had made history-themed content before, again, for my channel, History Bro, for some reason, I had it in my mind. We hadn't discussed it properly, or at all. I had it in my mind, for some reason, I remember clearly, we were going to talk about Alexander the Great. Something I'm still yet to do on Epochs. If you go over to my channel, History Bro, you can find 2 videos of 2.5 hours apiece, so 5 hours of me and Carl talking about Alexander the Great, with full references from Arrian and Plutarch and Curtius. It's a really good bit of long-form content, 5 hours of me and Carl talking about Alexander. And for some reason, I thought we were going to sort of recreate that and do that for Epochs from get-go. Anyway, I start on my first week in Swindon, and have a quick conversation, because it was always going to be in conversation with Carl. The first whole bunch of them, more than half of them, are in conversation with Carl. Some of them are with other people, and some of them are on my own. All right. But to begin with, they were all in conversation with Carl. So I thought we were going to do Alexandra, and he's like, no, I want to do Hanno the Navigator. So there you can see, it's episode 1, Epochs, episode 1, Hanno the Navigator. Anyone who's not familiar with this format, this is our new website, by the way. We're reworking, rejigging the entire Lotus Eaters website to actually make it good and professional, finally. Got loads of web devs, been working on that for quite a long time. Spent quite a lot of money and energy and time on that. So this is the beta version of it, if it looks a bit different, if you're used to the website. This is what it should look like going forward. But Carl says on week 1, no, I want to do Hanno the Navigator. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, that just came out of left field to me. I was like, okay, I know of Hanno the Navigator. I'm aware of who that is and what they were and early Carthage and all that stuff. But it's been a long, long time since I read the small accounts, the small amount of literature we've actually got on Hanno the Navigator. Give me a day or two just to reread it and read around it a bit. And okay, we'll do Hanno the Navigator. It really came out of nowhere that Carl said that. And I don't know why, particularly, he wanted to do Hanno the Navigator for episode 1, but that was Carl's choice. A lot of them, most of them, are my choice. Purely what I want to do. But especially in the early days, it was more like 50-50. Carl would pick the topic, or I would pick the topic. Then slowly that petered out where Carl picked the topic less and less a bit, and it was more and more me picking the topic. And anyway, nowadays, or for a long time, it's been just me picking it. But to begin with, often they were Carl's picks. So the very, very first one was that. Okay, and it's sort of like a baptism of fire a bit, isn't it, whenever you start doing something new? Again, I wasn't entirely new to the idea of sitting down and making long-form history-themed content. But still, it's the first one in a new job and everything. But Carl's a great conversationalist, isn't he? You've got to give him that. Even his worst detractors will admit that he's at a professional level of holding a conversation. And I like to think I'm good enough. Anyway, it was fine. It was absolutely fine. It was fun. They're nearly all fun. Not every single one, and I'll let you know when we talk about it, but nearly always it's just fun. It's just I've got the notes. I know the thing inside out, more or less. I've got more talking points than I could get through. So just sit down and enjoy it and just have a conversation about early Carthage and Hanno the Navigator. Got a few of the quotes in front of you on a laptop or on a screen or whatever. And just sit down and enjoy it. One thing I do remember from that first episode, it was in the old studio. We're in the old studio. And there was the old table there, if anyone remembers it. And just the way that studio was set up is that out of sight, effectively kind of behind you, 3/4 behind you, was a settee in that space, in that studio space. And I remember at the end of the recording, or very, very near the recording, I turned around and Callum was sitting on the settee. You know, Callum, who used to work here? And he'd obviously been sitting there the whole time, and I just wasn't aware of it. And I remember turning around and going, oh, you're sitting there, because usually no one would sit in that settee. Occasionally, if a guest came in, I remember one time Alex Stein came in, Primetime 99 Alex Stein, he came in and he brought his girlfriend and she sat on the settee while they're recording. Something like that would happen. But usually other members of Lotus Eaters wouldn't just sit in the studio, just sit there watching. But anyway, he did, and I remember turning around and being a bit shocked that Callum was sort of observing. If I'd known, it might have put me off slightly, but I didn't. Anyway, Hanno the Navigator got off to a good start. After that, I thought, okay, maybe I'd like to start with something like, or start doing Epochs more with things like, what did I have in mind? I had in mind that I wanted to do Gilgamesh or the Iliad. Now, ever since then, I still haven't done the Iliad. I've been threatening to do a long series all about the Iliad for 5 years now. And I will do it at some point, but it still hasn't happened. Gilgamesh we did do. Eventually, me, Carl and Stelios sat down and did very, very long form, like 3 or 4 hours worth of a single video, 3 or 4 hours, one of the longest Lotus Eaters videos we've ever done, all about Gilgamesh. And I think that was either just a one-off type piece of content, or maybe it was on Stelios's symposium. But nevertheless, there is hours of me, Carl, and Stelios talking about Gilgamesh, almost line by line, not quite line by line, but quite a deep textual analysis of Gilgamesh. So that is out there, but I haven't done Gilgamesh on Epochs. But that's what I had in mind. That's what I wanted to do. But Carl was like, no, let me reread the Iliad before we do that, and then we'll do that. And I was like, okay, fine. And he said the same thing about Gilgamesh. He was like, let's save Gilgamesh. Like, it's so good. Let's save it. Just get a few more under your belt, get the thread of it going, get used to it, and then we'll do the big ones like Gilgamesh and the Iliad. So I was left to just pick the next thing, and I wanted to do ancient history because, again, sort of start at the beginning, if you like, and my background is ancient history. My undergrad is ancient history, so that's really my wheelhouse, is the more ancient world. And when we've done Hanno the Navigator, I thought, okay, I'll do something that sort of kind of leads on from that, or is in kind of the same vein as that. So anyway, it's a great book I've had for a long time, got for Christmas many, many, many years ago, 20, 25 years ago, about Pythias. Pythias the Greek, a person from the ancient Greek world, the classical Greek world, who, according to his own account, whether you can believe it or not, sailed all the way up around the bottom of Spain through, what's it called, the Gibraltar, all the way up the Bay of Biscay to Britain, maybe all the way to the top of Britain, maybe as far as Iceland. They're not really sure. But he certainly went on some sort of extraordinary voyage, like Hanno the Navigator. And it's just a fantastic story, if you believe the accounts. So that's what we did next. All right, then Carl wanted to do Alcibiades. One of Carl's favourite figures is Alcibiades from the latter half of the Peloponnesian War, Athens versus Sparta. I mean, I love Alcibiades as well. It's a great, an incredible figure, larger than life figure, jumps out from ancient history, a bit like Alexander or Pyrrhus of Epirus. It's like when you read about it and when you know about it, it's like, oh, he's sort of undeniably a sort of a crazy, interesting Chad type person, right? So, okay. That was Carl's pick. He wanted to do Alcibiades. All right, then it was part of the idea from inception, really, to have guests sometimes. So from quite early on, Carl wanted us to have guests, and I'm happy to have a guest, speak to some other people, change it up a bit, make it a bit different. And I was a big fan, or am still a big fan of Critical Drinker. I've done a fair bit of content with him. There's a long form bit on History Bro where we talk about our favourite war films. I've been on his open bar a couple of times. Done a few bits and bobs with Will, the Critical Drinker. Great dude. I'd love to appear on his stuff more. Anyway, he's friends with Carl as well. They've made content all over the place over the years. And where Lotus Eaters as a whole were still just trying to get off the ground, Carl and everyone was sort of trying to call in a few favours. Can you help out? Because Critical Drinker by this point, 5 years ago, was already massive. Right, it was already a giant YouTuber by that point. And so I was thinking, who's sort of the biggest person within reason we could get on the show, to on Epochs, sort of help us out, boost it. Critical Drinker, you can only ask, right? There's no problem to ask, and if they say no, it's no big deal. So anyway, on Discord or something or other, I asked Will, would you come on and talk about history a little bit with me? And he was gracious enough to say yes. He's a very gracious, generous person with his time and with his fame. He's gracious and generous with it. And anyway, because it had to be sort of a history-based thing, and because he's a movie, TV, culture guy, critic, we were going to talk about a war movie. And so I think he picked it. I think it was him. It might have been me, but I think it was him. The 1970 film Waterloo. Brilliant film. And so that's what that is. That's what all that is. Brilliant film. And of course, we can talk about the film itself, and we can talk about the real history of the Battle of Waterloo and everything. Next one, Carl wasn't done with the Alcibiades thing. And it is a great story. What is it in? It's Thucydides is the main thing, main account. So the next couple? Yeah, the next couple are again about Alcibiades, the Sicilian expedition. That's Alcibiades' expedition, and even the next one after that. Yeah, great story. The Peloponnesian War is just great stuff. Next one, we tried to get another. We got another guest. This time it was Mauler. If anyone knows Mauler, you know that whole clique of guys, great guys. Mauler's like the EFAP chaps, isn't he? But there's that clique of like Nerdrotic, Drinker, Mauler, Hill versus Babyface, there's that clique of people. And they're all sort of adjacent to us, friends with Carl and, sort of on our side of the aisle, politically speaking, vaguely, one way or another, non-woke. And so, once again, Mauler was just on Carl's Discord. And I didn't know Mauler. I'd never spoke to Mauler before this at all. But once again, he's gracious enough, generous enough to say yes. And I asked him, this was his pick. I said, let's talk about a history film, just like we did with Drinker a couple of weeks back. Is there any particular war film? And he picked Inglourious Basterds. Now, I really like Inglourious Basterds. Of course, it's historically ridiculously inaccurate. But that's the point. It's not trying to be accurate. It's playing with history, isn't it? But he picked Inglourious Basterds, I do seem to remember. And I've watched that like 4 or 5 times. I think it's a great film. Again, not for the history. It's just a funny, great, entertaining film. So there you go, we talked all about that. It's like Quentin Tarantino reimagining history rather than anything else, but all right. Then Carl picked The Life of a Legionary. There's a sort of famous-ish book, written in the ancient world, if I recall. Like a legionary's handbook, almost. And me and Carl both love military history and the Romans, the ancient world. So we just did that. That was good. That was a fun one. Got another guest in, Apostolic Majesty. One of my favourite humans is Apostolic Majesty. Love the guy. I like people that are extremely knowledgeable. Love it. There's some people where if you come across as a know-it-all, it gets their back up. If you're sort of too knowledgeable or intelligent or clever or whatever, some people hate that. They hate it. They think you're like condescending or something, even if you're not. But other people love it. When there's someone, a talking head, that knows their stuff inside out, and you know that their knowledge base is gigantic, you can ask them almost anything and they'll know, within reason, of course. Ask them to drill down into something they just said and explain it, and they can, because they know their onions. I think that is amazing. I think that's brilliant. I love it. And Apostolic Majesty is one of those people where it's the real deal. Another way of putting it is the real deal. There's nothing fake or phony about it, right? There's nothing like a performative. If you scratch the surface, there's nothing there. No. It's the real deal. So I love to pick people's brains who have got that. Anyway, don't want to come across as too much of a sycophant for Apostolic Majesty. But he's probably my favourite history YouTuber. We had a discussion there about Justinian the First, and the all the Nikkei riots and the whole thing. It's a fascinating reign. Eastern Roman Emperor, Byzantine Emperor. Brilliant. One of the most famous Byzantine emperors. Classic story, brilliant story. Theodora, his empress, the whole 9 yards. There you go. Then we did Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. I think that was one of Carl's picks. Might be wrong, but I think it was. Again, just a classic, such a great story. Just everything about it is like romantic, not in the carnal sense. Just everything about it is just fantastic. Some real good picks early on. Then I picked The Year of the Four Emperors, so that's after Nero died, committed suicide, forced to commit suicide. After that happened, there was 4 emperors in a year, or 5, 6 emperors within 18 months odd. But the year of the 4 emperors, a classic bit of, it's like Rome, first century Rome, distilled down into an even more concentrated version of the insanity of like the first few generations of Caesars. The year of the 4 emperors. That's one of the best ones, one of the more interesting ones, I think. I mean, I think they're nearly all good, all worthy of re-listening to, but that one particularly, I think it's a great story, The Year of the 4 Emperors. Okay. Then we did Herodotus on the Scythians. So Herodotus is like a staple of ancient history, isn't it? Absolute staple. If you're into ancient history, want to say that you know about ancient history, you're going to have to read Herodotus or listen to it on audiobook. More than once, I would have thought. Anyway, he talks about one particular people, the Scythians, and there's whole books written about the Scythians. People from sort of the Central Asian steppe. It's not even clearly defined. I mean, whether they're from places like modern-day Ukraine or from much more Central Asia. Anyway, Scythians, fascinating stuff. I think that was Carl's pick, or maybe we both said, "What about that?" And we were both like, "Yeah, let's do that." So I can't quite remember. All right, the next one is Xerxes' army. That's if you've ever seen the film 300, that's Xerxes. And again, I think that was Carl's pick, but it might have been mine. I think it was Carl's pick. Again, just straight up sort of military history. Nerding out about military history. Just fun. It's just fun. You do a bit of reading, especially for the ancient world. Usually there's not a great deal of reading. Even if you've got to read all of Thucydides, you can do that in a week relatively easily. But usually it's just a few passages from something. You can do that within one day or a few days. Then you've got everything you really need. If you know enough around it, where you can just riff on anything. So yeah, something like Xerxes' army. Do a little bit of reading. Few days worth of reading maybe, and then just go and have a conversation for an hour and a half. Fun, great fun. Okay, next was The Crimes of Domitian. That was definitely one of my picks, because I love Edward Gibbon, an English historian writing at the end of the 18th century, and his sections on Domitian are brilliant, and also what Suetonius talks about Domitian. Got a fair bit on Domitian. He's one of the worst emperors. He's up there with Nero, Caligula, Elagabalus, Commodus. You know, he's one of the most sadistic sort of evil ones. So it's a great story, right? It's salacious. It's violent, and yeah, I think The Crimes of Domitian is, again, that's probably one of the more interesting ones. I think, in my humble opinion. Okay, the next one was definitely one of Carl's pick. It's a story of a giant naval. Well, we're talking all about the First Punic War. That's where Rome and Carthage went to war with each other over Sicily. And there was also one thing in there was a giant naval battle. Some say it's one of the biggest naval battles of all time, including the modern world. Surely it's not as big as Guadalcanal in the Pacific in World War II, or is it? I don't know. If the accounts are to be believed, and that's saying something. 280,000 men were killed in the naval engagement during the First Punic War. Definitely Carl's pick, but again, fascinating thing. Then I did. Then it was my pick, and this is where I was in conversation with Josh, Big Josh Firm, the Firminator, because he was interested in Roman Britain, like in the office. I'll say, I might do it on my own, usually in conversation with Carl, but might have an outside guest. Or if any of you guys, the other cast of the Lotus Eaters, the other presenters of the Lotus Eaters, if there's anything you ever want to do or interested in, we'll go on each other's shows, right? So I went on contemplations with Josh a whole bunch. I went on symposium with Stelios a whole bunch. Help Luca these days do some literature content, whatever it is, Go on Dan Tubbs' Brokenomics. we'll go on each other's shows. Right? So anyway, this was the first time Big Josh wanted to talk about, was interested in Roman Britain. Now, I know Roman Britain inside out, literally studied it at undergrad and after undergrad, as an Englishman, right? I'm going to know loads about Roman Britain. As a history nerd and an Englishman, it's your bread and butter on some level, right? If you're an Englishman and a history fan, you're going to know about the Duke of Wellington or Nelson, Admiral Lord Nelson, or Roman Britain. So having actually formally, properly studied it, done written essays in it and sitting exams about it, and then half a lifetime on top of that of reading around it. So love it, my staple. Could talk about Roman Britain for, no exaggeration, for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. But we only did, a 2-part series? Yeah, just a 2-part series. Oh no, not even that. So, okay, we talked about Caesar's expedition. So that's the first Roman expedition. Then we talked about Tacitus's Agricola. Tacitus wrote a book, other than the Annals and the Histories. He also wrote the Germania and the Agricola. The Agricola talks about Roman Britain. So then did that also with Josh. Yeah. Then when I was still in that vein, got into reading Tacitus, and the Agricola is very short, and also the Germania is very, very short, not much more than a pamphlet almost. So where I'd done the Agricola, I thought, it kind of makes sense to do the Germania. Back with Carl, in conversation with Carl. They're all interesting, but I think that's another very good one, another particularly good one, the Germania. All right. Then the Battle of Tunis. What was that? Okay, this is one of the first ones where I don't really remember it all that well. Okay, would that have been? I don't even remember that well. Okay, this is the first one where my memory's failing me ever so slightly. I guess it's about ancient Carthage. Maybe this was in the First Punic War again. I can't quite remember, Should I have a quick click on it and see what the description says? The Romans attempt to seize Carthage. Oh, right, okay, it is. Okay, there is that. Right. When the Romans attempted to seize it. Okay, yes, so that's the First Punic War again. So I imagine it would have been Carl who picked that one. Then the Sea People. Classic fare for ancient history lovers. Classic thing. Whether it was, the questioning, the mystery of who exactly the Sea People were, the Bronze Age collapse, all that sort of thing. Little bit of a murder mystery type thing, although Carl insisted he knows exactly who it is, and various historians now think they know who it really is, but it's still a bit of a mystery. But that's a good one. That's definitely a good one. Okay, and then I had picked a thing about Sir Francis Drake. Again, talking to Josh there, because Josh is from Plymouth, and Sir Francis Drake obviously connected to Plymouth and the Royal Navy and all that sort of thing. And I made a whole bunch of content about Drake before on History Bro, on my channel History Bro. So I know Sir Francis Drake inside out, his life and career and all the things around the story. I know inside out, and Josh was interested in that. So he's like, let's do a thing on Drake. So did that. That's a good one. Then we started a series, was it? Yeah, basically a series, a little mini-series. Or at least, if not a full series, episodes that lead one into another. So there's one about the Battle of Crécy, i.e. a smashing victory for the English in the 14th century. So sort of England maxing, talking about when we win. When we smash the French up. Was it Edward I, isn't it? And the Black Prince. Just a great English victory. One of the all-time greats, the Battle of Crécy. Then went on to do the Battle of Poitiers, again the Black Prince, where again we smashed the French. Right, so one leads into the other in the same generation, or half a generation later, or whatever it was. Then I decided to do the Battle of Agincourt. So 3 great victories in the 100 Years' War. The Battle of Agincourt is much later, but it's still within the 100 Years' War. So I have 3 great victories in that: Crécy, Poitiers, or Tours, and Agincourt. So usually I haven't ever revisited anything in Epochs. Right, if you've already done something, it seems a bit of a waste to talk about it again. But Henry V is one of those. So this is the first time I talked about Agincourt and the Battle of and Henry V. So just talked about the battle in that, but Henry V is one of those things. There's a few things in history that I know really inside out. I've kind of kept reading about it over and over again throughout my whole adult life. And Henry V is one of those. Been fascinated, like fixated almost on Henry V since I was about, I don't know, 13 or 14 or something. A real, or like a childhood fascination almost that I still have today. So of course early on I want to talk about Agincourt, and later you'll see, go on to do even more on it. Okay, so the next episode is just beyond Agincourt, just keep talking about it. Right, we finished the story of the Battle of Agincourt, I just want to keep going with the narrative. So I did that, and then beyond that, the end of the 100 Years' War, after Henry dies and Henry VI, his baby son, takes over, and England ends up losing the 100 Years' War effectively, finally, and Joan of Arc and all of that. So I just couldn't stop myself, just continuing the story, continuing the narrative. Okay, then me and Carl, I think, jointly decided, at this point, I remember us sitting down saying, it's all very well to have sort of a scattergun. You pick something, I pick something. Why don't we have plan a few ahead and like plan it a bit more? And I was like, fine, yeah, good. And so somehow we jointly decided we was going to talk about Byzantium for a while, for a few episodes. So we do the Nicairites, which again is Justinian the First, right? I already did a bit of conversation, didn't I, with Apostolic Majesty about Justinian. But so we return to it there, specifically in the Nika riots. Like this whole episode is just the few days that is the Nika riots. But then we went on to talk about Belisarius, that's Justinian's general who put down the Nika riots and then went on to reconquer the entire Western Roman world on behalf of Justinian. So it's part 1, part 2, and Belisarius part 3. Yeah, reconquering the West, and then Belisarius' final downfall. So we did a 3-part series, me and Carl just talking about Belisarius. Again, one of the greatest generals of antiquity, late antiquity. All right, after that, we did Gordon of Khartoum. Pretty sure that would have been my pick. Again, the reconquest of the Sudan, or that whole story. I wanted to do a few episodes about sort of Victorian times, or late Georgian Victorian times, the 19th century, sort of the height of the British Empire, and some of the great heroes the British Empire had. And so one of those is Gordon of Khartoum, or Gordon of China, as he was known before he was killed. Gordon of Khartoum. So yeah, there's an episode all on that. Again, if you like that sort of thing, very good episode. If that's your bag, if that's your wheelhouse, then a good one. Then I did The Life of Napier. Sir Charles Napier, again, just a great Victorian hero, effectively. Yeah, an incredible life. One of those lives where he was just involved in everything. But he's largely forgotten now. Most people, even a lot of history nerds, may not really know. They might have heard the name, but probably don't know about his career in any real detail. But it is great. It is fascinating. All right, then we went on to this, with Josh again. Josh wanted to do Vlad the Impaler, and I know all about Vlad the Impaler. Again, an incredible story. Almost beggars belief. But me and Josh thought we'd talk about Vlad. We both brought things to the table. Very enjoyable. Again, just fun to do that. And then it was Christmas time. So I did a bit of history-themed content about Christmas. You'll see that most years, I think, we do something or other around Christmas. Talking about the Saturnalia, which is not exactly the Roman Christmas, but it was the type of holiday the Romans had around that time of year, with gift-giving and various things that are similar-ish to Christmas. Like, to call Saturnalia the ancient Roman Christmas isn't really accurate, but nonetheless, there are loads of sorts of parallels. So, at Christmas time, in 2021, I did an episode all about Saturnalia there. Okay, then me and Cole decided we'd go through a bit of a phase of some of the great semi-mythical, semi-legendary, if not entirely legendary, ancient Greek people from the Lives of Plutarch. We both happily agreed to do that. So we did Theseus of Athens, Lycurgus of Sparta. Some of these great figures. Got to read Plutarch. We quote heavily from Plutarch and all that sort of thing. Doing a proper deep dive. Romulus and Remus. Solon, again, great Athenian lawgiver. These are all in Plutarch. Okay, then something different. We did a few of those in a row, and then something different. Got Apostolic Majesty back in. Quality. I talked to him for many an hour, so many. It was one recording, I believe, if I recall. But it was so long we split it into 2 episodes. Or was it even 3? Yeah, it was 3. Oh, 4. Was it 4? Split it into 4 episodes. Maybe it was recorded over 2 recording periods. But anyway, the next 4 episodes are talking with Apostolic Majesty all about the origins of World War One. So going into that in extreme detail. And again, you can't fake or half-arse having that much knowledge. Well, you can just talk about it endlessly for hour after hour after hour. Anything I say, any question I ask, he knows the answer to. Incredible. A remarkable mind. Great stuff. So we talked all about that for quite a few hours, if you want, about the origins of World War One in sort of quite a lot of detail, like audiobook length detail. That's all there for you. All right, then we got a bit of a one-off, a bit of a slightly different one. One of the first episodes where it's different was we got Mark. Dank's real name is Mark. Got Mark on because he's very good friends with Carl. And a friend of the website, a friend of the channel, old Count Dankula, and I had a conversation with him because I'm a fan of his stuff as well. I'm a fan of Dank, and he's got his own, as well as doing just current affairs and politics type stuff. He's also got, if you know anything about him, he's also got his own series of Mad Lads, which is sort of history themed, essentially, isn't it? Mad Lads. Like, a lot of it's modern, and maybe it's some is a bit comical. All right, it's not sort of like much ancient history stuff, although there is 1 or 2 bits of ancient history. But anyway, got him on, and I talked to him all about, a bit like this episode, about Epochs, about Mad Lads, to talk to him all about Mad Lads. Why did you pick that one? Like, let's talk a little bit in detail about this person that you did in detail, and pick it apart a bit, and just have a conversation with Dank all about it. So yeah, slight warning for any kiddies, that's laden with expletives, that episode, because Dank, like any good Scotsman, throws out F-bombs like there's no tomorrow. So yeah, just a little warning, if you're an adult and you play this in a room where there might be kids and you don't want them to hear F-bombs, just be aware. Alright, then we did a whole long series, the first long series, me and Carl talking about Napoleon. It didn't start off necessarily, we didn't do the first episode to have it in mind that we do a long series, but we just talked about the French Revolution first and foremost. It was going to be just a one-off episode about the French Revolution. So we did that, and then we thought, well, it just leads perfectly into Napoleon. And I love Napoleon. I mean, love to dislike him, effectively. I'm an Englishman. Come on. No, love the story of Napoleon. Love the career of Napoleon. Absolutely fascinating, all that stuff. So we thought, well, we did a thing about the revolution and how it ended, i.e. Napoleon firing grape shot into Parisian crowds. Well, let's just continue the story, the narrative, start talking about Napoleon. So we did. Turns out it was quite a long series. Look, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is it 8? Yeah, 8. An 8-part series, or 9-part series if you include the first one about the French Revolution. We ended up just retroactively calling it part 0. So it's an 9-part series all about Napoleon. And we do it in, as you can imagine, each one of these episodes is like, an hour, very rarely less than an hour. It's nearly always an hour, more like an hour and a half, sometimes as much as 2 hours, occasionally more than 2 hours, but in that ballpark, an hour and a half usually. So there you can see 8-9 part series on that. A small audiobook level of detail all about Napoleon. There you go. If you want to hear me and Carl chatting about Napoleon for hours on end, that's there for you. All right. Next one was a slightly different one-off. This was one of my favourite episodes. It's possibly my favourite episode in terms of how much fun I had researching and recording it. It was with Thomas Dowling. Thomas Dowling was an employee at Lotus Eaters relatively briefly. I can't remember how long he worked here, but it was a few months. I really like the guy. I think he's a great guy. Very, very interesting. Very, very clever guy. PhD student. I don't know if he's actually got his PhD yet. I should check in with him. If you watch this, Thomas Dowling, I'll check in with you. I hope you're doing all right, buddy. So, an employee that was at Lotus Eaters for a while. And at that time, again, I like throw it out to anyone in the office. Anyone want to talk about anything particular in history? Help me make a bit of content this week, sort of thing. Turns out, me and Thomas Dowling shared a love of racing and Formula One. So I thought, let's do something a bit different. Episode 53 as well. We'd just done a year. It was like my first year anniversary. Right, 52 weeks is a year. So it's just done a year. Bang on. And wanted to do something a bit different, sort of market. I'll do something a little bit different. You know, like this. 250th episode. So I decided, right, I'm not going to do something like Solon or Napoleon. I'm going to do the history of Formula One. I want to talk about that. It'll be fun. Thomas knows his stuff inside out as well. And so anyway, we did that. So it's slightly different. It's not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people actively don't care about racing or Formula One. But there you go. There are one or two anomalies in the list, in the back catalogue of Epochs. There you go. And we talk about it from the beginning, from the early racing, pre-World War II racing, all the way through to modern times. All right, the next one was the Strategicon of Maurice. This was one of Carl's picks. There's a book, the Strategicon of Maurice, is one of the later Roman emperors, Byzantine emperors, and there's a book that survives, short book, tells all about the strategies, how to beat different armies. And again, it's sort of classic military history fare. And it's a great read, an interesting read. Me and Carl decided to do that. All right, then the Wars of the Roses. Was that with John Wheatley? Yeah, there's another employee, if you remember John Wheatley, if anyone remembers John Wheatley. Again, he worked for Lotus Eaters relatively briefly, or he's certainly here for a few months. Again, I really liked the guy, really got on with him. Very, very interesting, very, very knowledgeable person. But at the time when he was working here, we somehow, I can't remember exactly, we decided we could do a conversation all about the Wars of the Roses and Henry VI. So we did that. That's there with Mr. John Wheatley. All right, then I decided I wanted to go on a bit of a Rome kick at that point. I wanted to talk about the age of Julius Caesar and Augustus, all that sort of stuff. So I started with the life of Pompey. I think it might have been originally Carl suggested it as just throwing it out there if possible. And I was like, yes, Pompey. Oh, I remember. I started researching something else. And Carl said, I remember this one now. A bit of a slight backstory to it. I remember I was researching something else, God knows what. And Carl came in and said, how about doing Pompey? You know, just an idea. And I was like, yeah, okay, I could do that, sure. Thinking he meant next week or some point in the future. And he was like, okay, tomorrow though. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, I know Pompey inside out, but I'll just spend between now and when we start recording reading nothing else, doing nothing else. So I remember that, but it's a good one. Carl's a big fan of Pompey. Pompey's one of Carl's favourites. And I think Pompey's all right. Well, it's definitely interesting. Definitely fascinating. But I'm not like a giant Pompey partisan, whereas Carl almost is. So we had a slightly different take on how much we would stand for Pompey Magnus. There you go, great bit of content. Again, one of the better ones, I would have thought. They're all great. In and around the same age, obviously it's about a generation later, but I decided I wanted to do Mark Antony, the Marcus Antonius, who goes to war with Augustus and marries Cleopatra. A great story. Then I did the life of Agrippa. Again, I'm sort of working around Augustus and Caesar here, really. You can see that. I'm sort of talking about the people around them. Marcus Agrippa, who is, Augustus's right-hand man, his top general, who defeats Mark Antony. The life of Mark Antony and Agrippa are sort of entwined a bit. So there you go, I was on an ancient Roman kick. Then I started looking at doing things all about the English monarchy. Sort of medieval, early medieval, high medieval, English monarchy type stuff. So I did the life of William Marshall. Brilliant. One of my favourite people from all of history, William the Marshal, or just William Marshall. Henry II's great warrior, the greatest knight in Christendom. And then Richard I, and then King John. And then he was the ward of Henry III. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating life. One of the greatest knights in Christendom, and went from basically a nobody to regent of England through sheer personal skill and ability. Incredible life. All right, then I decided to do the life of Alfred the Great. Again, a staple of English history, absolute staple of English history. Then we went on a kick of quite a few episodes of talking about just carrying on the story, going after Alfred the Great, just what happens next. I did an episode there that's just a general overview of Anglo-Saxon Britain, but then the next one is sort of drilling down a bit more into the life of Athelstan, who's, he's the grandson, isn't he? The grandson of Alfred the Great. It's basically continuing the story on. And then talking about sort of the end of the Ethelred the Unready. Right, the end of the Anglo-Saxon period, basically. Right, because it's after Ethelred, it's not long before we've got King Harold and then William the Conqueror, the Norman invasion. So a few episodes there about the Anglo-Saxon period. There was this Wheatley again. Yeah, the other bit of episode I did with John Wheatley was a parallel between Japan, because he knows loads about Japan, lived there and speaks a bit of Japanese, and that's one of his things, was Japan. Even knowing all about their medieval history and things in detail. And we did a parallel between English medieval history and Japanese medieval history. And it's a very, very interesting bit of content, I thought. Very, very interesting bit of content. Yeah. In fact, that's one I might even go back and rewatch. I don't really rewatch my own content very much. Occasionally I do for some reason, but usually I don't. Because one, I've lived it, and two, if I'm doing the post-production on it at all, I've had to re-listen to it a number of times in the post-production process. So the last thing I want to do is just listen to it again. Plus I'm not so vain, I want to listen to my own voice all that much. So I usually, very rarely, to be honest, go back and watch them myself. But once or twice I have done. Once or twice my own bit of Epochs has popped up in my YouTube feed or something, and I'm like, oh, go on in. But very rarely. But that one I might. Because I don't remember it that well, other than the feeling that it was good. The feeling that was a good conversation. That was an interesting conversation. When you're making a bit of content, you sort of know, is this boring? Is this interesting? Is this going to be fun for anyone to listen to? You sort of know when you make it. And I remember the impression of that was that was good. That was a quality conversation there. So, okay. All right, went on to the life of Canute. Right, so still in like the late Anglo-Saxon, well, the twilight of the Anglo-Saxon period. Right, then I did a mini-series all about, with Josh it would have been, yep, with Josh, A Bridge Too Far. There's obviously the film A Bridge Too Far and the book A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan. But then there's the real history of Operation Market Garden, i.e. the Allies' attempt to liberate Holland in World War II and get a bridgehead across the Rhine to be able to bounce into Germany and win the war before Christmas 1944, which didn't work. But I'm fascinated by the book and the film and the real history, and Josh was interested in doing it, or sitting there letting me talk at him. And there's a few episodes of that. How many? 2, 3, part 3, part 4. So there's a 4-part all about Operation Market Garden there. Again, if that's your bag, like World War II stuff, I highly recommend it. I think it's good. I really do think it's good content. All right, then we went back to Anglo-Saxon stuff. Harold Harefoot versus Arthur Canute. Back with Carl again. Just more Anglo-Saxon stuff. Game of Thrones style stuff. But obviously real. Edward the Confessor. Harold Hardrada. We're getting into like the closer and closer to the conquest. With Edward the Confessor and then Harold Hardrada. Harold Hardrada, fascinating life. Only the last little bit is like in England and getting himself killed in northern England. Beyond that, so much more is interesting about the life and career of Harold Hardrada. Okay, then we did the early life of William the Conqueror. Then we did a whole one just on the Battle of Hastings. Well, it's William the Conqueror Part 2. All right, William the Conqueror's early life. Then the pivotal point in his life, of course, the Battle of Hastings. And then did we go on, after the battle, what happened sort of fairly immediately after the Battle of Hastings. So we're drilling down into it in a fair amount of detail here. Remember, each one of these is long form. What happened directly after the Battle of Hastings, then what happens in the years after, William the Conqueror Part 4, all the rebellions, because he didn't just win the Battle of Hastings and then he's just king of England and that's it and everyone's fine with it. No. It's a very, very rocky road. All right, Part 5 of that, William's later life, what happened to him later in life, because he lives for like 20 years after the Battle of Hastings or more. What happened towards the end of his life and all the various events. His life was filled with events all the way to the end. Then we did the Doomsday Book. Anyone who knows about the Doomsday Book. The Doomsday Book, this episode. Now, I don't think any of my Epochs content is boring. I wouldn't make it, and I certainly wouldn't put it out if I thought it was boring. But that's one of the only episodes that I can recall where I saw any comments where people said, this is dull, this is boring. And it wasn't many comments. It wasn't like a unanimous opinion. It was only one or two here or there. And it's one of the only episodes where I've seen that at all. Basically never get people saying, this is dull, this is boring. You're boring me. 99.99% of the time I don't get that, which is nice, which is lovely. That's exactly what I'm aiming for. Whatever it is, I'd rather it be slop than boring. I hope it's neither, right? I hope it's genuinely quality content. But that Doomsday Book one, again, I didn't think it was. I thought it was fascinating. I wouldn't make content if I didn't think it was interesting. There's one or two comments on that one when I said it was boring. I guess maybe if it's not your bag, if you're not into the 11th century England, maybe you might find it boring. Maybe it's just that. I don't know. But I do remember seeing a comment or two. All right, well, it's what it is. You can't be perfect. You can't win them all, can you? Right, what was this one? I think this was... so this next episode, it was Remembrance Day. Look, it was actually published on the 11th of November. So me and Cole did a conversation about the armistice and about the very, very end of World War I, like 1918, how World War I came to an end, all the events leading up to the Germans finally signing an armistice in 1918. And because we realised, we knew ahead of time that it was going to go out naturally on a Sunday. It was going to go out on the 11th. It was going to go out on Remembrance Sunday. So we did a bit of content for that, basically. There you go. Then we go back to... then I go back to my what became now a long-standing and still continuing set of series about the English monarchy. Right, so we went all the way back to Alfred the Great, went all the way through people like Athelstan and Canute, right? Did loads on William the Conqueror. So just continuing that. So William Rufus, William II, the next guy, the next king, after William the Conqueror, his son. Another William II, William the Red, William Rufus, all about him. Quite a bad king. Seems to be probably quite tyrannical. Got himself murdered, probably. Assassinated. And then we just moved on, did the next one, did the next king, Henry I, his little brother, the next son, the youngest son of William the Conqueror, ruled for quite a long time. Henry the First, classic. And then I did, this one was quite good. This was a bit of a one-off where I'd done a few weeks worth of that. I thought I wanted just a palate cleanse. Let's do something completely different. And I don't know why I challenged myself, because Chinese history isn't particularly my thing. I have read about it and around it and am interested in it, but I can't say I'm any sort of expert in it the way I can sort of at least mildly claim that, certainly for ancient history and for British English history. I'm sort of very confident it's my wheelhouse. I can't really say that about Chinese history, despite how much I have read and watched documentaries and things all about it. Anyway, for whatever reason, I decided I'll do something a bit different. I'll do the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. Qin Shi Huangdi. And the story of the first emperor. A fascinating, absolutely fascinating life. You know, it's up there with like Augustus or something. It's not just the first emperor, so it's someone worthy of note. It's also an incredible story in and of its own right. That's like, it's in the 2nd century BC, so it's ancient history still. But Chinese ancient history, I think I did that justice. I hope I did. Again, I think that's among the better ones. That's obviously for other people to decide. Oh, this was fun. This was one of my very, very favourites to record. Doc Holliday. A little bit of a backstory to that one. I was in email correspondence with The Quartering, Jeremy at The Quartering. We'd had an email back and forth, only 2 or 3 emails back and forth, saying, would you come on, would you be a guest, like Critical Drinker or Mauler, or Apostolic Majesty or Dank? Would you come on and talk to me about history sometime? And he was like, yeah, sure. I was like, I've noticed you've said before a few times in your content that you love Doc Holliday. I'm like, I love Doc Holliday. I love the Wild West. I love the story of Wyatt Earp and all that. Would you come on and do Doc Holliday? And anyway, it just didn't happen. It fell apart. He didn't reply for a while, and it just fell apart. That happens loads. That does happen loads. It's no one's fault particularly or anything. I'm not having a go at Jeremy whatsoever. I'd like him to come on at some point and have a conversation with him. I'm a fan. Whatever happens, it didn't happen. But I'd done the research for Doc Holliday, all the reading really. And so when I realised it wasn't going to happen, I was like, I'm still going to do it anyway. I'm just going to make a bit of content about Doc Holliday anyway. And Carl didn't know much about it at all. So it's really me telling Carl the story from scratch. Again, I think that's among the better ones. I certainly had a great deal of fun reading and doing it and recording it. All right, then I decided I'd go back to sort of English heroes. Clive of India, the Battle of Crecy. Brilliant story if you're a fan of England and English history and the Empire and all that sort of thing. If you haven't got a chip on your shoulder about it. Clive of India's one of the very best to ever do it. Then I did one there, the Battle of Kursk. It was interrupted with something about Calvin Robinson, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. But you see there's 2 episodes about the Battle of Kursk there, the biggest ever tank engagement and the biggest ever aerial combat happened at the Battle of Kursk between the Nazis and the Soviets in World War II, 1943 is it, the Kursk salient. I'm fascinated by it. The biggest battle of all time, arguably, depending on how you measure things. This was one of the few, very few, where I got any sort of significant kickback from fans. And it wasn't that bad. But a few of them, tank bros, people that know about tanks in tons and tons of detail. There's a whole sort of subculture of people that just love tanks. And my knowledge just wasn't really up to snuff for them, really. Again, it wasn't loads. I didn't get tons of pushback or... and it wasn't really bad, but a few comments saying, oh, you've exposed yourself there for not really knowing that thing, whatever it was, properly. Again, it wasn't that bad. I think there's still good content. Well, it is still good content. But if you're a massive, massive tank nerd, you might be ever so slightly disappointed that I didn't go into sort of the technical side more of tanks, because that's what the story is really all about. Giant tank engagement, tank versus tank duels on a giant scale on the Eurasian steppe between the Soviets and the Nazis. I still think it's good. Again, it was Christmas, was it? Yeah, 25th of December. So again, we knew that Sunday would be Christmas Day. So I made a bit of content. Obviously, they're all pre-recorded. I made a bit of content with Calvin Robinson, the father Calvin Robinson, who's a friend of the show, of course. I mean, well, he had a show, didn't he, on Lotus Eaters for a while. And so that was the first time I ever sat down with Calvin. And we just talked about Christmas and Christianity a bit. Yeah, good conversation. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, really enjoyed it. It's a Christmas special. All right, there's part 2 of the Kursk thing. Then I wanted to go back at that point. In the new year, I decided go back to my wheelhouse, ancient Rome. Let's do the Caesars, a lot of the Caesars. Again, I missed out Augustus because I was sort of saving him for some couple of things in my mind. I was like, it's so good, it's so big, I want to save it. The way Carl was like, let's not do the Iliad yet. Let's save that for sort of a special time. I want to do it so much justice that I want to reread it entirely, and I want to. Let's just not do it yet. Let's keep it for some sort of special thing. That's what I had in my mind about Augustus. He's so one of my favourites, right? He's up there with Henry V, or maybe the Duke of Wellington, or something like that. For me personally, it's like one of my personal heroes, or that I know so much about that I was not quite afraid, but like just timid about doing it. But the others got no qualms about. So I did the life of Tiberius. Again, one of the really, really bad emperors. Not quite as bad as Caligula or Nero, but not far off. In that ballpark. So I did Nero. I did Tiberius. Then the very next emperor after Tiberius is Caligula. So I did Caligula there. Very next emperor after Caligula is Claudius. So I do Claudius. You can see the theme. And then Nero. Nero's the next one. So I do Nero. So I do the Julio-Claudians. From Tiberius to Nero, Julio-Claudians. Boom, 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 boom. You're welcome. All right. Next one, I decided to do something a bit different because I've done the ancient world now for quite a few weeks in a row, like a month or more in a row. So it's like, I'll do something else now. And I've always been fascinated by Captain Scott of the Antarctic. I got content. I'd already made content on it on my channel, History Bro, so I didn't sort of knew it inside out. Done the reading on it, so I thought I'd sort of do it for Epochs. Great story, fascinating story. Again, it's in the vein of an English British hero, right? It's sort of part of that, but obviously more modern, early 20th century. There you go, Captain Scott. And then once I've done Scott, as you can see, the way these things often go, I do something similar, adjacent to it. Did Shackleton next, and then I did Conquering Everest, like Edmund Hillary and Mallory, and the story of people first, and Tenzing Norgay, people first summiting Everest. Talk all about Everest. So those 3 in a row are sort of a mini series, even though they're not exactly connected. Scott, Shackleton, and Hillary. There you go. I mean, Hillary's a Kiwi, isn't he? He's not British, but still, nonetheless. I think those 3 episodes in a row there are very good. I then did a funny one. Dan Tubb started working for us. He's still here. And we wanted to do a bit, again, I throw it out there. If there's anything interesting about history you want to talk about, let's do it. I'll appear on your show, you can appear on mine, etc., etc. And he wanted to talk about, because his thing is economics, isn't it? Economics and markets and money and all that sort of thing. And I think in history that's fascinating about on that side of things is the tulip bubble. If you've never heard of that, in the, what would it be? The 18th century, would it be? I think maybe the 18th century. In Holland, the market for buying bulbs for tulips, the flower, a tulip, the bulb for the rare ones, the market went through, it was a bubble. They became worth insane amounts. They were worth the same as a house, like a single tulip bulb, a rare one. Anyway, it's a classic example of where you have market bubbles, like the Wall Street crash, a number of things. So yeah. If you're interested in the historical financial crises, yeah, it wasn't just the tulip one. We also talked about, I think, if I recall, the Wall Street crash. And there's been other bubbles and crashes throughout history. Quite a lot of them, actually. We just talked all about that. Again, if that's your thing, I think it's a great bit of content. If it's not your thing, give it a pass. All right, then I did one. I can't remember if me or Cole decided to do it. I think maybe it was sort of basically a joint decision. We were both like, should we do that one? And we were both like, yes, let's do that one. It's a story of William Wilberforce and the abolition of slavery. Again, if that interests you, I think that's a very good one. The Alamo, I'm half American, so I sometimes want to do, and I've read loads about American history. Civil War. The first video I ever made on History Bro was about the American Civil War. I know a lot about American history. Right? Again, where it's my heritage, my family, I'm going to be reading more about American history than your average English history nerd. And the Alamo is just a great story. Brilliant last stand story. So I did one on that. There you go. Then was this with Josh? Yeah. Then Josh, another conversation with Josh. Josh is fascinated by truly ancient history, like prehistory, like the earliest things, like the earliest humans ever. We've got all sorts of content on his show, Contemplations, about the earliest humans, missing links like Neanderthals and Homo erectus and Australopithecus and prehistory, basically. And so he was fascinated by the oldest things. And Göbekli Tepe, I think that's one of the better ones, one of the more interesting ones, where we both just know a fair bit about Göbekli Tepe, and we talk all about that. Is, if you don't know, one of, if not arguably, the oldest, like, architecture there is. Architecture is like they think it's a temple. We're not even sure if it's a temple, but whatever it is, some of the oldest stonework ever, like going back to 10,000 BC, is it? You know, it predates Ur or Uruk, or it predates Jericho, or anything like that. They're basically hunter-gatherer people. So it predates pottery, predates writing. It's basically hunter-gatherer people did build some sort of structure. That's how old it is, Göbekli Tepe. Again, I find it absolutely fascinating. Okay, there was that with Josh. And then, again, in the sort of the same vein, started talking to Carl about the actual earliest cities, proper cities, like the Sumerians, like places like Ur and Uruk in Mesopotamia, southern Iraq, basically, the oldest cities. And then around episode 100, we changed. You can see we changed the thumbnail, the design of thumbnail, or at least for that one, didn't we? And for episode 100, I've been talking to Carl about this ever since day one. You know, we're nearly 2 years into it now. I wanted to do an episode about Sargon of Akkad. With Sargon of Akkad, right? Sargon on Sargon. And Cole's always like, yeah, we'll do it. He never ruled it out, but he wasn't breaking his neck to do it. Although he does find that period of history fascinating. He wouldn't have chosen that name if he didn't. But he wasn't breaking his neck to do it. But in the end, I talked him into it. Like a long time before episode 100, I was like, can we do it for episode 100? And he was like, oh, all right, go on then. So we did that. Me and Carl talking about Sargon of Akkad, the historical figure, Sargon of Akkad, with Carl, Sargon of Akkad, Benjamin. Oh, you get it. Episode 100. Like this episode 250, something a bit different, something hopefully a bit more eye-catching or whatever. So there you go. Then me and Carl we've been talking about this since day one as well, but only really got round to it almost 2 years later, was going to physically visit the British Museum. Like, actually physically go there in person, get someone else, John Wong, was it? Get someone else to... oh no, that's a bit later on. Sorry, we did do that at the British Museum. We'll get to that later. But Carl wanted to carry on talking about after Sargon, just talk about the Assyrians. Yeah, this was definitely Carl's pick, but I was happy to. Love it. Again, it's a staple of ancient history. If you want to call yourself an ancient history nerd, you need to know all about the Assyrians. Not Syrians, Assyrians, completely different thing. So yeah, we did like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Is there any more? Part 5. So 5-part series just about the Assyrians. For me, fascinating. Dan Tubb came back. We did another economics-based history thing. Oh, this one was purely on the Wall Street crash, looking at the Wall Street crash in real detail. I very much enjoyed doing that. What next? We had... I think this was me on my own. Oh no, sorry, it was with Apostolic Majesty. We got AM back, the great AM, just to talk about Lenin. Because there's so much to say about Lenin and around Lenin. So much that can be said. So that was a brilliant conversation. As always, AM brings the goods. Can't fault it. Quality stuff. All right, then this was the first, and I think only one I've ever done with Harry, Big Harry Robinson. Well, at the time, he was researching and was reading all about and was fascinated in the Spanish Civil War of the 20th century when Franco beat the communists in Spain. And I've been fascinated by that. If you need to know, if you want to be a history nerd about World War II and World War One, you need to know everything that happened between the wars, right? I mean, I did an A-level in modern history, so I even studied the period a bit, only at A-level, but still, after that, all the years after, still read around it, fascinated by it. So he wanted to do something. Somehow we came to a decision. Should we talk about the Spanish Civil War? And he was like, yes, that would be great. So again, it's mainly me telling him about it all. He's sort of gracious enough to sort of sit there and listen to me politely. But once again, if you're fascinated in that, if you're interested in that, very, very good bit of content. If that's really not your bag, you couldn't care less about Franco and Spain, then give it a miss. But if you do like it, I think it's a very good one. You know, very highly researched, all sorts of quotes from all over the place, I think. All right, what's the next one? So I go back to where I made some content about William Marshall. Remember that? And William Marshall is connected to Henry II. I decided at some point I wanted to do Henry II, but I really wanted to do people around him first, a bit like do people around Augustus. And then when I finally do the Augustus or Henry II, I've already filled in loads of the picture already. So anyway, that's what I decided to do the life of Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was Henry II's wife and the mother of Richard the Lionheart and King John. So pivotal. I think that's the first one, isn't it? Where it's all about a woman. Maybe there was one episode that was largely about Joan of Arc. But this one is entirely sort of a biography of a woman. I think it's the first one. There you go. After that, there was one fan of Epochs, who had said for ages, and I've got 2 or 3 people like this, and I will get round to you all at some point. There was one person who had been asking for day one. They've been asking very insistently and very politely, can you do when Britain and Holland went to war with each other 3 times in, the 17th century or into the early 18th century? And they were very persistent, and this is of key importance, very polite about it. And I said I would, and for like a year or more, just hadn't got round to it. And then eventually, anyway, I did. And so I'm quite proud of that. Quite proud of that episode. I think that's a good episode, an interesting episode. Most people don't know much about it, so it should be interesting to you. Then this is one with Connor Tomlinson. When Connor Tomlinson worked for us, made a few bits of content with Connor, but only 1 or 2 epochs. I made more content with him about literature stuff. Made one about the film Labyrinth with David Bowie. Made one with him about Animal Farm, the George Orwell book, and a couple of other things, a couple of other films and books I made with Connor Tomlinson. But only 1 or 2, I think maybe only 1 of actual epochs. And he's interested in gangsters, like the mafia and stuff, as am I. And so, where we thought it might be a series, we might go on to make content about later gangsters, like into the 70s and even more modern ones. But I thought I wanted to start with sort of the OG, the original gangster. Of course, it's not the original. There were people before him, of course, but one of the highlights of the story of the mafia in the United States is Lucky Luciano. Right? He started the Commission. He's the one that made organised crime organised. That's what people say about it. Again, fascinating life. Ended up actually living and dying of natural causes in old age. Very rare for these people. Okay, the next one. This was with Josh. That's quite long. I think it's over 2.5 hours or something. Now, this episode is a bit of an odd one. A little bit. Tiny bit, anyway. Because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed reading about it. I've read around. I remember Waco myself, for real. Actually, my childhood memories. Read around it and watched documentaries around it for years since. Did quite a lot of research for this, as did Josh. We made the episode. I thought it was great. I thought it was one of my best ones. Put it out, and it is the episode where I got the most pushback. In fact, no other single Epochs episode has had anywhere near the pushback. I very rarely get any pushback. Very rarely get any real negative comments at all, really. Other than the odd thing here or there. Again, can't please everyone. But this is the only episode, I would say, where a big chunk of people weren't happy with it. Weren't happy about it. Because I basically took the piss out of Seventh-day Adventists. The Branch Davidians are a branch of Christianity, a branch of Seventh-day Adventists. And I didn't even mean to. I wasn't like actively ridiculing them, but I was just pretty dismissive and flippant about it. Things like what was it? Like that sort of literal interpretation of the Bible, that revelation, that on the day of judgment, on rapture, that how it's described in the Bible, that's literally going to happen. Right, I can't remember the details of it now. What is it? It's all things like the mountains will melt, and all the rivers will boil, and all the oceans will boil, and everyone will rise from everyone that's buried in the ground that's ever died will rise from the dead, and Christ will come down, literally, physically come down out of the heavens and come and judge everyone, and all this stuff that's in the book of Revelation. And that certain people, Adventists, believe that's literally true. And I was a bit flippant and dismissive about it. Just saying that, I was just said, that's nonsense, isn't it? That sort of angle I took with it. And a lot of people didn't like that. Quite a few people didn't take too kindly to that angle, to that take. But again, you can't please everyone. At some point, you're going to piss some people off. If I had my time again, I would be a little bit more delicate about it. There you go. And where I got a couple of tiny details wrong, they jumped all over that. Like I said, the book of Revelations, not Revelation. Like, little, small, relatively, I think, small details here or there, slightly wrong. Or the angle that it wasn't just a complete and utter massacre by the ATF and the FBI, and the Branch Davidians didn't really do anything wrong and aren't really responsible for their own demise. It was just a pure act of evil by the federal government. Like, the idea that wasn't my angle annoyed some people. I was trying to be fair-minded. I was saying this is exactly what happened. It's quite a long bit of content. I tried to drill into it in loads of detail, almost moment by moment, certainly once the ATF and the FBI turned up. Almost moment by moment. This is what happened. This is what happened next. This caused that. This person said that. Or that. Did it, 2.5 hours or whatever it is. Loads of detail. So I thought I'd done it fairly. But not everyone enjoyed that one. I thoroughly enjoyed recording it. But there you go. All right. Again, can't please everyone all the time. So then I go back to talking around Henry II. So there's one whole one about Thomas Becket, the troublesome priest. Again, if your thing is medieval English history, cracking video, I would say. Cracking. All right, what did I do then? Is it this is just me on my own, because occasionally, by this point, like 2 years odd in, sometimes Carl wouldn't want to do it every single week, or couldn't every single week. So that one looks like it was on my own, and I was just... Oh, no, sorry, it says it right there, doesn't it? It was Rupert August, another sort of history YouTube person, a great guy, knows his stuff inside out. Again, just a guest came on. Would you want to come on Epochs? Yes. What do you fancy doing? And he picked the Bourbon Restoration, because he knows it inside out. So that's much more him talking than me. He knows way more about it than I do. Yeah, Rupert, I'd like to have you back on someday, buddy. Hit me up. We'll have you back on. No problem. Lovely jubbly. All right, then I did one with Dan Tubb talking about Black Wednesday. That's when John Major lost the pound, when George Soros had a blinking match with the Treasury and won. The pound was massively devalued in the 1990s, Black Wednesday. There you go, a bit of financial economic history. An interesting story, though. Interesting story, for sure. Then I did the Battle of Blenheim, John Churchill. Again, a great sort of English history hero. Someone like Clive of India sort of level. Great stuff if that's your thing. Then continued the war, continued the narrative going forward from there. The War of the Spanish Succession. I think fascinating story. If you want to know about European history, understand early modern European history, really need to know about the War of the Spanish Succession. Went on from there, talk about Robert Walpole, the first ever Prime Minister, basically. If you're interested in political history or English history at all. A long life, a long reign, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, arguably one of the greatest statesmen Britain ever had. Robert Walpole, absolutely pivotal person for English history, British history. So then we decided for whatever reason to go back and talk about Rome, the end of Rome, ancient Western Rome. So we talk about the decline and fall there. It's when, I think it was all about when Alaric the Goth finally conquers and sacks Rome for the first time in the 5th century, is it? So yeah, the decline and fall of Rome. Then we went on, it's a bit later in history, but not all that much later, where Attila the Hun comes crashing out of the east and goes all the way through sort of Europe, almost, basically, pretty much. Very nearly sacks Rome himself. And is only averted at the last minute. So anyway, a bit all about Attila the Hun. If you want to know about Attila the Hun, there you go. That's there for you. Then we decided to go back to... this is with Luca. So this would have been the first time I had Luca in. Big fan of Luca. I was the first person to have him into Lotus Eaters. I'll happily take credit for that. We'd made a bit of content, or maybe two bits of content for my my own history channel, History Bro. I was like, you've got to come on to Lotus Eaters at some point. So we did, and we decided, again, I can't remember if it was him or me, or it was just like a symbiotic decision. We just both decided somehow that we wanted to talk about Pitt the Younger. Again, one of our greatest statesmen of all time, one of the greater prime ministers ever. And it's all during the age of Napoleon. We both know it inside out, both love the story, the life of Pitt the Younger. So we did, a 2-part, or was it even a 3-part? Or two-part series on that. Fair few hours of me and Luca talking about Pitt the Younger. All right, and then go on to do the War of the Austrian Succession. And so that's really the life and career of Frederick the Great. Again, fascinating, a titan of history. Fascinating if you want to know about European history and how we end up with, sort of like everything from Napoleon to World War One, all that stuff. Like you've got to know a bit about Frederick the Great. Fascinating. Okay, then there was a little bit of a one-off with a very, very fascinating, very, very lovely chap called Luke Parker, who knows all about the Battle of Kohima and is involved in an organisation, a charitable trust for some of the survivors, people to remember the Battle of Kohima. So he very politely asked to come in and talk to me all about that. And it was a great conversation. Battle of Kohima, people who might not know, it's when the Japanese sort of attempted to invade India, basically, one way or another. There's much more to it than that. That's low resolution. And the British Army and Indians pushed them back. And there was a big battle at a place called Kohima. It was a very very pivotal part of the war out in that part of the world in World War Two. But most people don't know about it very much. Just because it's just not as as big as everything that happened in North Africa or in Europe, or the Americans jumping from islands fighting the Japanese there. It's just not as well known, which is a real shame, because one, it's fascinating, and two, those men, They're real bloody heroes. And it's just a real shame that it's sort of largely forgotten. So I wanted to do that a little bit of justice, and Luke Parker did very, very well in that. Okay, a little bit of a one-off then. I then returned to talk about Frederick the Great, basically, the 7 Years' War. And then another sort of little bit of a one-off where we had Shadiversity. Shad was over from Australia. He's very good friends with Carl and friends with the channel and everything. And he loves his history, doesn't he? He loves his weapons. He loves his castles. All that sort of thing. And I love castles as well. That's sort of, again, a true childhood joy. Visiting a castle. Looking at books about castles. Just a ruin of a castle. To this day, I love walking around a ruined abbey or a ruined castle. Well, not even ruins, if they're intact. The more intact, the better, of course. But love castles. Right? Proper childhood fascination. And I think Shad is, well, he is very much in the same sort of space. So when he was over, I said, you know, do you want to, he was on the podcast. I was like, do you want to make a bit of history themed content? Sit in the other room, talk to me about history for an hour or two. Fancy it? And he was like, yeah, cool, sure. Let's do castles. So I put together a list of my favourite castles, top 10, I think, favourite castles. And we just had a chat. Again, if that's your thing, if castles are your thing, that's a bloody great bit of content. You will love it. If you don't care about castles, one, there's something wrong with you. No, I'm joking. Two, give it a miss if you don't care about castles. But if you do, very, very interesting bit of content. All right, next there was, I've talked to Tim Davies before. Tim Davies, if you don't know, is a retired fast jet pilot, RAF, Royal Navy and RAF officer. He was a squadron leader. He would teach other people how to fly fast jets. Right? He was sort of one of the best of the best. Like, he knows red arrows. He knows the people that are in the red arrows. He would tell the red arrows where they're going wrong. That's the level Tim Davies is. Right? A proper flying ace. A real life Top Gun. Brilliant guy. Love him to bits. Fascinating. On top of all of that, fascinating. Anyway, I made a bit of content with him, a couple of bits of content with him before on my channel, History Bro, and again, I was like, do you want to come in at some point, come and talk to me for an Epochs, for Lotus Eaters? And again, very gracious and generous with his time, said, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So we sat down there. It's a long conversation all about the history of flight, both civil and aviation, going back to like the Wright brothers, all the way through to modern fast jets. Picking the brain of a fighter pilot, well, bomber pilot, well, a fast jet pilot. Like, what's this like? What's it like to fly a jet? Would you do this? How would you do that? How would you react in here? What's your opinion on this, on that? Again, if that's your thing, I think it's a brilliant bit of content if that's your thing. All right. Japan's path to Pearl Harbor. This was one on my own. It was one of the first ones, among the first ones where I was just completely on my own. Around this time, Carl had decided he wasn't going to do it much anymore. He didn't have the time. Lotus Eaters had grown to such an extent that Carl's wearing many hats. And of course he's got a family, a big family. And there's just too much. It was just too much on his plate. And I can do it on my own. I can monologue forever, right? This is my bag. It's what I do. It's what I did for History Bro before I even worked here. So that's no problem for me. So yeah, this was one of the only ones where I got a tiny bit of pushback as well. I mispronounced a couple of things quite embarrassingly. But still good. I mean, it's still fine. That was the only problem with it, really. Mispronounced a couple of things. So it's nearly entirely good and fine. But a couple of little areas I'm very, very, very mildly embarrassed about in that one. But it's no big deal. Whatever. Once again, if you're interested in that, a bit of Japanese history, check that one out for sure. All right, then I decided I was going to do... Cole's still back there. It's not like he never did it ever again, but... me and Cole decided we was going to we were saving, there's a few we've been saving, like the Duke of Wellington and like Lord Nelson and I was saving Augustus. We decided finally we was going to do Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington. And this was the first time, one of the only times, one of only 2 or 3 or 4 times ever, where I've really had sort of butterflies in my stomach before recording it. And sort of the night before, sort of worrying about it a bit. You know, I've done all the reading. I've done all the reading I could possibly do within reason. I've done all the I'm perfectly comfortable and happy with all my research and my knowledge, my general knowledge in and around it. And yet still, I've got some butterflies because it's sort of the great man. I've got to do it justice. It's got to be a great video. It's got to be a great bit of content. Like a little bit of a feeling of I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to even dare to tell the story of the Duke of Wellington. I mean, that feeling wasn't strong enough to put me off or to really scare me out of doing it. It's not that. But I had a little bit of butterflies, which I don't really get. I hardly ever get. Hardly ever. I think only 2 or 3 times ever have I had that. But this was one of them. So when I did an interview with Dan Carlin for History Bro on my channel, History Bro, there's a long form conversation, 2 hours worth or whatever, with me and Dan Carling, if you know about history and history themed content creators. Dan Carlin is sort of one of the all-time greats, one of my heroes, not necessarily in his politics, but in terms of making history themed content. I think he's superb. Again, I don't agree with all his politics, but as a storyteller and a historian, one of my heroes. And I got an interview with him, and I bloody had butterflies that time. It's like talking to someone you really, really look up to, a bit of a hero. I mean, anyway. So we did, how many episodes was on the Duke of Wellington? It was only 2 parts, 3 parts. 3 parts on the Duke of Wellington. There you go. Early life out in India, Napoleon years, and the later years when he was Prime Minister and old. There you go. Then, next, got the extreme privilege of chatting to one Mr. Godfrey Bloom, who used to be an MEP, and a fascinating person. I love old Godders. Absolutely love him. He knows his stuff inside out, right? He's a one of those people that I could, anyway, just sit there and chat to for hours and hours and hours and hours. Could just chat to that man for hours. Fascinating, lovely guy. Absolutely lovely personality. I wish I could talk to him more. I wish I could have him in every other week. I really do. Anyway, we posed ourselves the question, or I posed the question, should Britain have stayed out of World War One? So we're just talking all about World War One and the run up to it, bit of the 19th century, all sorts of bits and bobs. Just comes again, if that's your interest, that is a quality bit of content. Really, maybe in the top 5 in terms of sort of quality, I would say. All right, then finally, because I'd broken the seal on doing Wellington, I decided we'll do Nelson. Was it only a one part episode on Nelson? I think maybe it was very long. I can't quite remember, but I thought it was more than one part. Anyway. There we go. Admiral Lord Nelson, one of our greatest heroes, arguably our greatest hero ever, arguably. There you go. Classic Epochs. And then finally, after going around Henry II, what had I done? I'd done Eleanor of Aquitaine, I'd done William Marshall, I'd done Thomas Becket. Finally, I got to do Henry himself. Henry II, Henry Plantagenet. And again, that's continuing the sort of broken series of all the monarchs of England from Alfred the Great onwards, right? We've done William the Conqueror and we've done his sons and stuff. Now on to Henry II. Did we ever do a bit on the anarchy? Certainly on my channel, History Bro, there's a bit all about the anarchy and Matilda and Stephen of Blois to fill in the gap if we didn't ever do one. I guess we didn't ever do one on Epochs. Maybe that's something I should go back and do just to fill in that gap. It's definitely a long form bit of content about that on History Bro, if you want me filling in that gap between Henry I and Henry II. All right, because there's a whole civil war between those two. All right, then I talked to Rubber, I think, was it? Talking about Zulus. Talk about the film Zulu and Zulu Dawn, but also really mainly talking about the real history of the Zulu War. Once again, if that's your interest, good stuff, check it out. Then, once again, continuing the story of the kings of England after Henry II, his eldest son, Richard I, the Coeur de Lion, the Lion-Hearted. All about him. Was that a one part? Or no, it was a 2-part or 3-part. We did a 3-part series because Carl loves Richard I. Who doesn't? Any good Englishman should love the story of Richard I. So we did a 3-part series on that. Again, his early life and rebellions. Then out on crusade, the Third Crusade. We very nearly got all the way to Jerusalem and defeated Saladin, but didn't. And then the last years of his life. So 3-part series there on Richard the Lionheart. Then we decided to do one. Oh, I'm with Luca here. This is me and Luca talking about when Constantinople went. So what is that? That's the Fourth Crusade, would it be? The Fourth Crusade, where Christian knights burnt down Constantinople. Constantinople was was Christian, not the same type, not Catholic, not the same type of Christianity exactly as the Western Christian knights that besieged it and sacked it. But still, they're all supposed to be Christians, and the Muslim infidel is the true enemy. But nonetheless, yeah, the Fourth Crusade. There you go. The title is the Fourth Crusade. Me and Luca, I think that's a relatively long one. Then continuing the story after Richard I, his younger brother, John, King John, part 1, part 2. So 2-part on King John. Second one concentrating on Magna Carta. Then continuing on the story, King John's son, a little boy, Henry III. So part 1, we did 2-part on Henry III. All right. Well, because the second part is really about the Simon de Montfort and the rise of Longshanks, the rise of Edward I. And there's a whole sort of Barons' Rebellion, almost civil war thing with Henry III and Simon de Montfort, and then the Longshanks coming of age. So we continued it on, talking about Edward I. Part 1, part 2, part 3. He's hammering the Scots. He's still hammering the Scots, part 3. Okay, so he hammered the Welsh and the Scots, to be fair. All right, so a 3-part series on Longshanks. And then we continued on. I think this is where Carl sort of stopped doing it, basically. Or maybe that was the last one. I think maybe that was the last one when we talked about Edward II, which was Longshanks' son. And Edward II, Edward of Carmarthen, is much, much weaker. Edward I. Henry III is weak. Edward I is super strong. Edward II is super weak. Or pretty weak, anyway. Then at that point, I'd had enough of doing the kings and queens, because I've been doing it for a fair few months at that point. I wanted to change to do something different. So I'd been talking about, or had threatened, for, again, almost since the beginning, because we're knocking the 3rd year into it now. I'd been threatening to do a thing all about the Turtles, i.e. a biography or a history of all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, hero turtles. I'll do a biography all about Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, and Raphael. I finally got round to doing it, but what I realised was the life of Donatello, and to a lesser extent Raphael, is not that fascinating. Certainly Donatello is not particularly fascinating. Donatello did come out with some masterpieces, some absolute masterpieces, but not that many. Raphael, same thing. Lots of people consider him a master, and he is, and he did all sorts of stuff. But his life, the events of his life, and he as a person, isn't that interesting. He was just an artist. Whereas, though, Leonardo and Michelangelo, not only are they masters that came out with masterpiece after masterpiece, but their actual personality, their life, the events of what they did and where they went and who they met and what they said and everything that happened around them is fascinating. So, where I said I'd do all 4 turtles, I decided no, I'll just do Leonardo and Michelangelo. Largely quoting from the Lives by Vasari. So yeah, look, Leonardo part 1, part 2 of Leonardo. They're doing it in a fair amount of detail. And then straight into Michelangelo, part 1, with a hiatus there, but there's a part 2. Was there even a part 3 of Michelangelo? Yeah, part 3 of Michelangelo. So 3-parter on Michelangelo. 2-parter on Leonardo, and then 3-parter on Michelangelo. So if you like the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, and I think it's fascinating stuff. It was interrupted there with where I got Apostolic Majesty in again. Doesn't say it on the thumbnail or on the title, but it was with Apostolic Majesty. And at that time, it was just at the time, if you remember, where Tucker Carlson had gone to Russia and had done an interview with Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. Remember that? And in that long interview, Putin used it as a vehicle to just lecture Tucker and his viewers, by extension, about Russian-Ukrainian history. Quite funny, actually. Very interesting, actually. Anyway, me and Apostolic Majesty, particularly Apostolic Majesty, because his knowledge is greater than mine, we both sort of realised or saw that although it was interesting what Vladimir Putin was saying and was largely correct, almost entirely correct, there are a few bits and bobs that he'd said there that either weren't right or he was spinning it a little bit. Again, I think what Putin said in that interview with Tucker is largely true and correct and accurate. I mean, 90% so. Maybe more than 90%, roughly. But there's a few bits and bobs where it's like, I don't know about that, though. That isn't quite right, or that's not quite how it went, or you're putting a rosy spin on that, or you're ignoring that, you're lying by omission about that little thing there. So anyway, me and Apostolic Majesty decided we'd do a long-form bit of content, picking it apart and talking about it in even more detail than he did. So once again, if you're interested in early Russian-Ukrainian history, that one would be right up your alley. All right, after Michelangelo, I decided to continue the story of sort of the Italian Renaissance, the story of Florence and the Medici and all that sort of thing. And so this is one of my favourite episodes. It's a story all about Savonarola, the Mad Monk of Florence. I think, just my personal opinion, is top 5. I think it's a fascinating one and well delivered by me. No, I think it's a really good, honestly, really good bit of content. I would like to think that even if you don't particularly care about the Italian, like the 15th century, 16th century of Italy, even if you don't particularly care about that period, I hope you would still find that video interesting. Yeah, if someone said pick out top 3, top 5 ones you're sort of most proud of, or you want to stand as sort of as an emblem for the whole epochs, I may well pick that one. Maybe I'm wrong. It's up to everyone takes what they want from these things, don't they? You might find it one of the crap one. I don't know. I think it's good. I think that's a really good one. All right, carried on the story, just talking about the Medici. A whole one just all about a bit of a grand overview of a few hundred years worth of Medici family history. Again, because some epochs are drilled down quite tight, where I talk about just a few days worth of history sometimes, and other times I'm doing a big sweep, zoomed out, hundreds of years worth of history. So in the Medici, that one about the Medici is sort of a zoomed out overview type thing. Okay, so after that Medici one, where I'd been in the Middle Ages for quite a few weeks, few months even, I decided to go back to my roots a little bit and talk about ancient Rome, the end of the Republic, the early empire. Well, the end of the Republic, really. Back to my roots, right in my wheelhouse, the thing I know, arguably, maybe, best. And so for the next quite a while, I just concentrated on that. So here we've got one, it's called The Beginning of the End, but it's about Tiberius Gracchus. And so, yeah, the story all about the beginning of the end of the Roman Republic. So a good 200 years out from Caesar and Augustus, 200 years before Caesar and Augustus sort of times. And then, so yeah, the next whole many weeks is all about that. After Tiberius Gracchus, I mean, this is classic, maybe the golden age of epochs. Maybe. Got Tiberius Gracchus, then go into Gaius Gracchus, his younger brother. Then go into Marius and Sulla, part 1. The Roman Republic really beginning to fracture and fall apart. Civil wars beginning. Marius and Sulla, part 1. A part 2, a part 3. Tons of detail. Part 4. 4 parts just on Marius and Sulla. Then there was an interregnum there. I talked about Captain Cook with Luca. Was that a two-parter? Yeah, two-parter on Captain Cook, Captain James Cook, going around the world. Another great sort of English-British hero type story with Luca there. There was another slight hiatus before continuing with the Roman Republic, where I talked with Rubber all about The Lion in Winter, the film The Lion in Winter, which is about Henry II. So even more detail really about Henry II. Again, one of my all-time favourites. Heroes. Oh, back to Rome then. That was just an interruption. Talking about Crassus, 2 parts on Crassus. Two parts on Crassus, the rich man in Rome, one of the richest men ever to have lived. Fascinating life. We're now talking about the generation or so just before Caesar, sort of overlapping in between Marius and Sulla and Caesar times, Caesar Pompey times. So 2 parts on that. Then a whole episode just on the Catiline conspiracy with Elizabeth Haverin. I got her on as a guest. I said, "Is there anything you particularly want to talk about?" Or I can't remember if it was her or me. It was probably me. Said, could you do the Catiline conspiracy? And she was like, sure. So there's a conversation with Elizabeth Haverin all about the Catiline conspiracy. A very small bit of history, really. Just a few days. I mean, there's lots to talk about around it, before and after, but the Catiline conspiracy itself is only a few days long, so it's sort of fairly tight, focused one, that. And then carrying on to, part 3 about Crassus. So it's a 3-parter just about Crassus. Well, Crassus is involved and lived at the time of the Catiline conspiracy, so it's all part of the same thing. All right. Then after Crassus, I did Cato. Is there one missing? Don't tell me there's one missing. Well, because Cato part 2 and part 3 on Cato the Younger, that is. I should have to have a word with the website people. Seems like Cato part 1 is missing. That won't do, will it? Yeah. Number 168 and then 170. So, number 169, Cato part 1, seems to be missing. I shall remedy that. It's not good enough. Okay, so about a three-part, should be, series on Cato the Younger. Fascinating life. Even more interesting than Crassus, I would say. One of the greatest personages from that whole period, the end of the Republic, is Cato, in my mind, for my money. Fascinating stuff. Then I was lucky enough to speak to Mr. Godfrey Bloom again, all about the history of money. We're talking all about gold, the history of gold. Once again, if that's your thing, I think you'll find that very, very interesting conversation. All right, that was just an interregnum again, carried on with the end of the Republic. So Pompey and Caesar, part 1, part 2, part 3. How many parts was it? I think just 3 parts. 3 parts, mainly on Pompey, if I recall. Okay, then I've got Survive the Jive, Tom Rousell. Brilliant dude. An absolutely brilliant human being, Tom Rousell. We were talking about ancient Britain, talking about Iron Age hill forts, the Anglo-Saxons, all sorts of stuff. All sorts of stuff in that one. If you know Survive the Jive, if you know of him, you're almost certainly a fan. That's how good he is. Yeah, quality conversation. Again, he's the type of person I would just talk to all the time if I could. I'd do a long form bit of conversation with him every single week if I could. He's very, very generous with his time. Then me and Luca talked about Thomas Cromwell. Was that a one-parter? It's just a one-parter, but I think, if I recall, it's quite a long conversation. We talked all about Thomas Cromwell, not to be confused with Oliver Cromwell, and how he's depicted in fiction, both in A Man for All Seasons and Wolf Hall, and what the real Thomas Cromwell was like, or must have been like. So, bit of an overlap between film, literature, and real history. Again, if you're interested in Henry VIII, Days of Henry VIII, check that one out. I'm sure you'll like it. All right, then continued on with Caesar and Pompey, part 4 of Caesar. Well, went from Pompey, it morphed into Caesar because their lives overlap so much. So part 4 on Caesar. And then, yeah, Apostolic Majesty. So finally got round to, even though it's a bit out of order, it's not all perfectly in chronological order, Apostolic Majesty got in contact with me and said, you've been talking about doing a bit of conversation about Augustus, Octavian, forever. Do you want to do it? Do you want to have the conversation? And I was like, yeah, there's no one better. There's honestly would be hardly anyone better I could think of to do it with than Apostolic Majesty. So we did that. Was that a one-parter or did we have to cut it out? No, it was a one-parter. It will be a long conversation though. So I like to think I know my stuff. Well, I do really know my stuff inside out when it comes to Octavian. It's one of the people in history I know most about. Read all the original sources many times. And of course, Apostolic Majesty can take that to the bank that Apostolic Majesty knows what he's talking about 100%. So 2 people talking about it who really do know the stuff without blowing my own trumpet too much. So yeah, a definitive bit of content about the life of Octavian, otherwise known as Augustus, the first emperor. All right, then continued on with Caesar. Just a really long. I decided for whatever reason I was going to do Caesar in stupid detail, absolute audiobook level amounts of detail. So part 5, part 6, part 7, part 8. It went on and on and on. 9, 10, 11, 12. How many was it? Was it 20 odd? 13, 14. Every little thing. Like a whole episode just about the rise of Vercingetorix, one of Caesar's Gallic enemies. A second part just on the fall of Vercingetorix. So that's how much detail it is going in, right? Part 16, part 18, 20. Was it up to 21? Yeah, so a 21 part series on the life of Julius Caesar. So really going through the lives and accounts from the ancient world of the life of Caesar with sort of a fine-tooth comb. Not exactly line for line, but getting there. As much detail as I could muster, really. All about the life of Caesar. I mean, each one of these is long form, so if there's a 21-part series, gives you an idea, it's well over 21 hours. Probably closer to 30 hours, maybe more, 35 hours, I don't know. A lot. All right, at that point, I'd had enough of ancient Rome for a while. Went back to medieval times, continuing the series all about the monarchy. And I was up to Edward III. All right, I'd done Edward II, Edward Carmarthen. You've got 3 Eddies in a row. Edward first, second, and third, one after the other. So I was up to Edward III, so I did that. And then after him, Richard II and his calamitous reign. Then Henry IV, as you can see, just carrying on. And then I got back to... So after Henry IV, it is Henry V. And I've already done a bit of content on him, haven't I? So it's only a couple of times ever I've returned to something. Did a very, very early episode, didn't we? Me and Carl talking about Pompey in kind of general terms. Went back and talked about him again for a couple of episodes at the beginning of my Caesar series. And the only other time I've done it, if I recall, the only other time I've ever returned to something is Henry V. So if you remember earlier on, I certainly did something just about the Battle of Agincourt. But I go back here and do a long series, again, in tons of details, almost as much detail as I could really manage, all about the life of Henry V. Not just an hour and a bit, but hours and hours and hours worth. So how many parts is that? 1, 2... Oh, that was an interesting. There's many parts, but how many was it in the end? Henry V, part 4... Part 6, part 8, 10, 11. In the end, an 11-part series. An 11-part series all on the life of Henry V. Well, England's greatest medieval king. Greatest martial king. There you go, 11-part series. You're welcome. In between that, though, there's a few different other things. Got Luca back in. I think he was working for us at this point. If he wasn't, he was to be a full employee very soon. We came back in and we've both talked about, ever since I've ever had conversations with Luca, we've both talked about how we love the life and adventures of T.E. Lawrence, Thomas Lawrence, i.e. Lawrence of Arabia, and his whole story. And his book, Lawrence of Arabia's own memoir, 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And so we've got a 2-part, is it 2-part or even 3? No, 3-part, 4-part 4-part conversation all about that. So again, loads of detail, really. Loads of detail about Lawrence of Arabia. I do beg your pardon. It was a 5-parter. 5-parter. I think we recorded that over 2 sessions. Must have done. Right, there's a conversation there. Was it my first conversation I had with Alex Masters? I think I talked to Alex Masters, that Steam guy, on some other things. Just had quote unquote interviews with him. It wasn't a full Epochs episode. That can't be the first time I spoke to Alex Masters. Anyway, he's very, very knowledgeable about all sorts of things, actually, about a vast number of things. But his real wheelhouse is steam, trains, steam power, steam engines, locomotives, all sorts of things like that. So I got him on, and we talked all about. Well, we didn't even get into trains really, if I recall the first conversation. I just kept picking his brain about like the nature of how we got to even the first steam engines, like the very, very earliest kernels of what's required to even begin to think about building a steam engine. Like, what was the first ever piston ever made? Stuff like that. I find it absolutely fascinating. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think a lot of people, a lot of boys, will be fascinated by that sort of thing. All right, so there's the Henry V stuff. Was there any other interruptions in it? No. Okay. So after the Henry V series, we, as you can see here, we changed the design of the thumbnail. People thought, it's not really much to do with me. I don't make the thumbnails. I never have. Quite often I have something to do with the post-production, but I never make thumbnails. Anyway, it was decided that there will be a change of design, so you can see sort of a new design of thumbnail going forward. So was I talking to... This must be talking to... No, I think it was just me. It was just me talking about the history of air power. Or it was about the history of bombing, when we went from the very, very earliest World War I biplanes, people dropping grenades and mortar shells by hand out of an aeroplane, to 21st century laser-guided precision smart munitions, the history of that, and loads of the bombing of World War II and all sorts of things. So again, classic sort of military history stuff. After that, did another long series about Magellan, the first man, a Portuguese man, but under the flag of the Spanish. First man to circumnavigate the globe, go all the way around the globe and come back. And so I did that because I've read around that topic for years on end. I did that in loads of detail. How many parts was it? Let's quickly scroll up to remind you how many parts the Magellan thing was ultimately. Was that knocking on... Oh, well, it was 13 parts. There you go. So probably knocking 20 hours odd of content just on the voyage of Magellan. Just on the voyage of Magellan. Okay, there's a couple of other things in between there that was interrupted with. Because 13 episodes, right, that's a few months worth. So in between there, I had a very good conversation, very, very interesting conversation with David English. David English, great chap. Check him out if you can find him. He's got his own content. He's on Twitter. Absolutely brilliant dude. We decided we were going to talk about the Siege of Malta. There's a Mel Gibson film coming out soon, all about that. It's a great turning point, a great victory for the forces of Christendom against the forces of Islam. A brilliant story, holding out against all odds. Almost certainly all going to die to a man like the anime, but then didn't, and then just won. Brilliant story. David English. Check him out. Okay. Oh, we've got Elizabeth Haverin back in. She wanted to talk about King Arthur. That's one of her things. She knows loads about the Arthurian legends. Very interested in all that, as am I. So it was like, okay, if you come back, we'll do that. So she did, and we did. There you go. Half legend. More legend than man. Arguably. Alright. We've finished up all the Magellan stuff. And then what happened? What did I start talking about after Magellan? Verdun. So we're getting close to, it's not that long ago. So Verdun, a little bit of a backstory on this Verdun thing. As you'll see, I started the Verdun series because I've been talking about doing Verdun for a couple of years, good couple of years. I started doing Verdun, and then it's one of the few times, only 2 or 3 times I can think of ever, where I sort of got, not exactly writer's block, it doesn't work like that. Just to let you know how I do it, is I do loads of reading. Well, I've already hopefully done half a lifetime's worth of reading on the thing already, so that's my baseline. Very, very rarely do I do something I don't really know about, read about it for a few weeks, and then make an Epochs about it. That's very rare. I have done that a couple of times, but usually I already know a load about the thing already. Then I do a bit of extra brushing up and reading and get a few quotes, make a handful of notes, maybe, just a few notes, just a few pointers for myself. All right, remember to talk about that thing. And that's it. I definitely don't write a script and then just read the script. It's not, it doesn't, I don't do that at all. I couldn't do that. It wouldn't work. You can't pump out a long form bit of content every week for years on end. If you did it like that, that would be too much work. So what I do, I just make just a few notes. Like, for example, in Verdun, I'll say a note that just says Fort Douaumont. And I'll notice that, and I've got, right, so I've now got like 10 minutes, 40 minutes worth of knowledge in my head about the Fort Douaumont. And then I just riff on Fort Douaumont, right, for example. I've got a few notes like that. Literally, sometimes just 5 notes, 10, 12 pointers to remember to mention that thing. And I do it sort of off the cuff, so to speak. Okay, but Verdun, this is one of the few times where that whole process didn't really work very well. And I don't know why. It's difficult to break down, difficult to tell you why. I myself don't know. It's because there's so much to be said about World War I and about Verdun specifically. So much that could be said. And I didn't want to do a 13-part series, a 21-part series. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do a 2, 3, maybe 4-part series, something like that. And so, for the first time, really, I found it slightly difficult to tell the story, or rather to tell the story to my satisfaction. I mean, I did it in the end. It wasn't impossible, but yeah, really, obviously, really wanted to do it justice. Absolutely fascinated by World War I and Verdun, particularly Verdun. Anyway, just struggled slightly to let you know, behind the scenes, trying to tell that story of Verdun. What to leave out. It boils down to I'd had to leave out loads of stuff. Right? If I talked about everything I know about Verdun, it would be 20 hours or something. So if you're not going to do that, then it's an exercise in what am I going to leave out. I found that a little bit difficult. A little bit. All right, so there was Verdun Part 2. And then I interrupted myself for a fair bit and then kept putting it off, finished putting off the Verdun thing for a while. Again, I think the only time I've ever really done that on Epochs. Where I, interrupt a long series with something else, but not put it off for quite a while. Anyway, I got in Marcus, i.e. Furus Pertinax, Iron Age agriculturalist. The man goes by a few names. He is a fascinating dude, Australian dude who knows his ancient history better than me. As well as me, if not better. Absolutely knows his stuff, 100%. The type of person you could just have conversation with for evening after evening after evening after evening. Almost endless amounts of knowledge, a bit like apostolic majesty, So, yeah, got him in. Privileged to call him my friend. We talked about the Byzantine Empire. In fact, a little bit of lore, a little bit of Epochs lore is occasionally what happens is if you record stuff all the time, multiple things a week for years on end, eventually you'll have a technical problem where you recorded something and for whatever reason it gets lost or deleted. It will eventually happen. Hopefully never happen. It's disaster when that happens. One time I had, years ago, right near the beginning, when we was in the old studio, I had a long-form conversation with a guy, I think he's called That History Chap. Do you know him? I think that's what he calls himself. That History Chap. A great YouTuber. Brilliant history YouTuber. Got him on remotely, have a conversation with him remotely. If I recall, we talked about I think we talked about the Wars of the Roses, the Duke of York, Edward the Fourth's father, I believe. Anyway, we had a good hour and a half long conversation. Wrapped it up, finished it off. After the conversation, the producers go, sorry, technical reasons, his side of the conversation didn't record. It's worthless. It's ruined. That's nothing. Okay, that happens. If you record loads of stuff, eventually something like that will happen. Worst bit about it, other than that I've wasted time and energy, is that I had to then go back to him, that history chap. I think that's what he's called, that history chap. I had to go back to him and say, sorry, dreadfully sorry, but we failed to record it. Entirely our fault. And he was quite gracious about it, but since then I've asked him to come back and do another bit, and he just hasn't. And I don't blame him. He just hasn't responded to that. He's not interested now, and I don't blame him. It's a real shame, because he's a great, seems like a really great dude. Of course knows his stuff. So if you ever see this history chap, can't apologise enough. You're welcome, 100% welcome at any time. Anyway, saying all of that, I had that. It's only happened to me twice, has it? Twice ever. One was that, and the other one was when Marcus came in about a year before this. He was over in Britain. He lives in Australia. He was over in Britain, and we did a really brilliant recording all about really early Rome, the Roman kings and stuff, the very, very beginnings of the Roman Republic. And we recorded loads. We recorded like 3-4 hours worth. It would have been a few episodes worth of Epochs. And it got lost in a comedy of errors. It got lost. It was filed the wrong way. I won't even bore you too much of the details, but it was a comedy of errors. It was filed the wrong way, and then someone did a sweep to clear up some folders and rename stuff, and it got put in the wrong place. And then to save space, because even though we've got massive amounts of space in like Lotus Eater's servers, well, not servers, in the shared drive, whatever, giant amount of space. It's not infinite. It's not infinite. And it got deleted. We didn't work on it quick enough. We sort of sat on it for a couple of months. And then when it came to time to edit it and make it into a proper thing, it had been deleted. Disaster. Absolute disaster. Worst bit of it is I have to tell Marcus. Ring him up. You remember that conversation you did? You came halfway across the world. You didn't come just to do that, but remember when you was on the other side of the world and you spent nearly a whole day talking to me, and we created a brilliant bit of content? Yeah, it's gone. It's gone. Embarrassing. A shame. It was a great conversation. Anyway, about a year after that or so, he comes back and we have a good conversation about the Byzantine Empire. Was it 2-part? Was it more than 3-part? A 3-parter. So a long conversation with Marcus Furious Pertinax, Iron Age agriculturalist, all about Byzantium on the Fourth Crusade. So yeah, revisited that one because I did a conversation with Luca, didn't I, earlier on, like a couple of years before this, about the Fourth Crusade. Very pivotal thing, really, for European history, or even Near Eastern history. The Fourth Crusade. All right, after that, I got AM back again, Apostolic Majesty. We'll talk about Talleyrand. Charles Talleyrand. Or Talleyrand. He was one of Napoleon's right-hand men, but not military. He was just a statesman, politician, diplomat. Fascinating life. Up there with for me, Cato the Younger, or Augustus, or Henry V, in terms of how interesting his life was. Just packed with events the whole time. Brilliant stuff. All right, what then? Oh, part 2 of Talleyrand. Then we've got Alex Masters back in for a second part about steam, the history of steam and steam engines. Because the first one we did barely touched on like the real history of steam engines. Was talking around it a fair bit, and I kept going back to the very earliest things. And he wanted to, rightly, fairly, to actually start talking about trains, the history of trains and everything. So got him in. That was a long conversation. So that went into part 4. Yeah, part 2, part 3, and part 4 with Alex Masters, that steam guy. Check him out on Twitter. He's called That Steam Guy. Alex, That Steam Guy on Twitter. Check him out. Fascinating dude. All right, then I decided I'd sort of start doing something a little bit different before I return at some point to the ancient world and to continuing the story of the British monarchy. For whatever reason, it was around Christmas. This is Christmas just gone. I'd been meaning to tell the story of the Operation Nimrod when the SAS stormed the Iranian embassy in London in 1980. I think that's a fascinating, brilliant story, and I've wanted to tell that story ever since day one. Ever since the beginning of History Bro, even. I've wanted to tell that story. Anyway, at Christmas, or New Year time, finally got round to doing it. And I think that is one of my better ones. Top 5, top 10. I think that's a really good one, in my, just my personal opinion. Anyway, people did seem to like it, so I thought we'd do more sort of Special Forces operations, raids, Special Forces raids and things like that. So the next one I did was about, and that SS one is a freemium, by the way. You can watch it in full for free without signing up to the website or anything. A few of them are freemium. There's got to be a dozen or so are freemium. Maybe, is it that many? Some of them are completely free in their entirety. You don't have to pay the £5 a month. But do consider becoming, if you're watching this, because this one will be freemium. If you're watching this for free, and you want to watch any of these, you can either buy them individually for like £1 or £2 or something, or just become a member of lotuseaters.com. You become a bronze member for £5 a month, and then you get access to all of it, absolutely all of it, and everyone else's content. All right, so after the SS one, I did one about when the German Nazi special forces in World War II rescued Mussolini. Mussolini was being held under arrest by Italians after his regime fell. Hitler didn't like that, so he went and saved a daring mountaintop raid by Nazi special forces in World War II. Classic story. Then I finally finished the Verdun thing. Part 3. Finally, part 3 of Verdun. So you can see how I struggled to finish the Verdun story. But I did in the end. Then I did one going back to Special Forces, the origins of the SAS, all about David Sterling and the war in North Africa against Rommel and elements of the Luftwaffe in North Africa. Again, I think that's one of my better ones as well. Another very good one, I think. Very interesting one. Then I talked about the raid. This is only a few weeks ago now. Yeah, we're nearly there. The raid on Saint-Nazaire. Again, a classic World War II era Special Forces commando raid. People that love their World War II stories and commando raids. That's a very famous one. It's a great, again, just a great story. And then just last week I did the story of Vietnam, Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs operations in Vietnam. And so that brings us up to date. And now we're at episode 250. And going forward, I will do more Special Forces stuff. I'm going to continue my thing all about the monarchy, the English monarchy. So what, I got up to and finished Henry V. So I'll now go on to his son, Henry VI, and onwards. There'll be dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of episodes more on that to get us up to date on that. We'll always keep cooking away on that. Much, much more ancient history stuff. I'm going to do, Alexander, the Diadochi, all the successors of Alexander. I'm going to do Hannibal again, Xerxes. I'm going to do the Anabasis of Xerxes. Loads more ancient history stuff. Pyrrhus of Epirus. Got to do all of those things. Multiple part series, all of those things on their own. Loads and loads more. Endless things to talk about from ancient history and medieval history. And, just long may it last. Oh, one other thing I'll say. There is someone out there, more than one person I think, but certainly one person, who's very, very, very kindly asked me to do more stuff about the Royal Navy during the age of Cochrane and the age of the late age of sail, the Royal Navy after, in and around and after Nelson. And I will do that. I've said I will. They've been asking very nicely for a very long time. And for a very long time I've said, yes, I will do that eventually. But I will. I'm not just entirely fobbing you off. I should hopefully get to that this year at some point. In the first half of this year, hopefully. All right, so loads more to do. Onwards and upwards. I hope that I will reach 500 episodes, 1,000 episodes. Why not? As long as Lotus Eaters is going, and as long as I'm working here, I will do everything I can to deliver you a long-form bit of history content on a Sunday. That's my promise to you. If I ever don't, there will be an exceptional reason why not. Like, I've been I've been like bedridden ill with flu. That would be the only thing I can imagine that would prevent it from happening. And I'm rarely ill. Like that ill, anyway. Feel a little under the weather quite often, but bedridden ill with a fever. I can't get out of bed. I can't focus and stand up and stuff. I'm very, very, very rarely ill like that, if ever, really. So it's my promise to you, I keep bringing you this content. I love it. I'm proud of it. I enjoy it. I hope you do too. I really do hope you do too. I know some people love it. I know some people might sort of tut at this episode of Epochs because it's not the usual thing. But I think some people will also appreciate it and like to know a little bit of the behind the scenes, a little bit of the backstories of some of the things. All right, I think this video's been long enough as it is. Episode 250. I'll try and do something a little bit special, maybe something a little bit different for episode 260, because episode 260 will mark the fifth year anniversary, won't it? That will be exactly 5 years worth. Episode 260. So I'll do something a little bit different there. Not this sort of thing, but maybe talk about Beau Brummell, my namesake. Or maybe talk about Major Francis Langhorne Dade, my ancestor, who fought the American Indians in modern-day Florida. Maybe something like that. Something a bit different for episode 260. But beyond that, I shall keep going. And please do watch. Please do consider signing up to lotuseaters.com. Coming at least a bronze tier member. We'd love to have you. All right. Well, with all that said, thanks once again for watching, and I shall see you next week. Take care.